This is American Morning for Monday, December 23rd, 2002.
Legend of rock.
Sad and sudden news. Founding father of punk rock, Joe Strummer, died yesterday.
Vocalist and songwriter for the British punk band.
Home in Somerset, apparently peacefully, of a heart attack.
Joe
Strummer est décédé hier à l'âge de 50 ans avec son groupe mythique créé en Angleterre en 75.
We live in, we need Joe Strummer more than ever.
I wouldn't be in a band had I not heard The Clash.
Joe, we're going to have your name on screen. Would you like anything under your name? Would you like Mescalero, The Clash, or anything like that?
I'd like you to write punk rock warlord, with warlord being one word.
White riot, I want to riot. White riot, a riot on my own. White riot, I want to riot. White riot, a riot on my own. Black men got a lot of problems, but they don't mind throwing a brick. White people go to school, where they teach you how to be thick. Everybody does just what you're told to. Nobody wants go to jail.
All transmitters to full. All receivers to boost. This is London calling. This is London calling. First of all, welcome to the program. All peoples of the world. This is Joe Strummer at the controls. In Bush House in the heart of London. This land is your land. This world is your world. Your world.
A lot of people won't get no supper tonight.
We're going to say the unsayable and play the unplayable. Broadcasting what needs to be cast. If your radio's tuned here, your radio's tuned right. My father was born in India. He only became an English citizen 2 years before I was born. After the war, he came to London and joined the Foreign Office.
He was very, very left-wing, which we thought was quite surprising because he spoke like a very pucker Englishman.
What on earth Ron was doing being a diplomat was completely beyond me. He questioned everything.
My parents weren't musical at all, and I think if I've got any musical tradition, it comes from my mother's side, and she was born on a farm 50 miles south of John O'Groats in a town called Bonar Bridge, which is very highland and very wild.
Anna was just this Scottish heather. And the great thing about Joe, he's got those two combinations, you know, of the generosity of Anna and the questioning of Ron.
Fries, Turkish delight.
My father was posted to Turkey, that's why I was born there.
He was screaming in Turkish when he was about 3, shouting down the stairs some Turkish curse that he'd learned.
David was 18 months older than Joe, and they were just like chalk and cheese.
My father was then posted to Cairo for 2 years, and then to Mexico City for 2 years. I went to a Mexican school where they spoke no English, and then to Bonn in West Germany.
See, I got 'em, see the signs, stripped and cleaned before your eyes. Sweet love, fresh and ready to cook. Crawfish.
That's a great Elvis Presley and my favorite Elvis tune because it's got that New Orleans flavor in there and you can feel the heat on the street.
1960, I believe, was the first time I saw him. Johnny Mello, he was called then. He was obsessed with taking my sister's clothes off. He said to me, let's take your sister's clothes off and hide them in his Uncle John's cupboard, because no one will ever find them in there. David would just go along with us. Even at that early age, Joe seemed to be the leader of the two of them.
Then I came to England to boarding school. I often think about my parents and how I must have felt about it, because it was like being sent away and seeing them only once a year. It really changed my life because I just realized I had to forget about my parents and deal with this. It was a school where people hung themselves. I quickly realized that you either became a power or you were crushed. I had a gang because I realized you had to fight fire with fire. It was either bully or be bullied. I was one of the principal bullies. And there was no protection from anybody or anything. I was happiest at school because I was in charge of my own world. My brother was very shy. He was a little bit older than me in the year above. They used to say in school he hadn't said a word all term. And I was the opposite. I was a mouthy little git.
Joe kept himself out of trouble, very cleverly. I mean, we'd all be in the shit, wouldn't we?
Most of the time.
Joe always... He knew how to handle people, even the people that were trying to hurt him.
Work all night and a drink a rum.
Reporting the Scouts is a good way of getting out of school for a weekend, I think, was the reason that we joined.
Stacks banana till the morning come.
We used to spend a lot of time building camps and campfires and all that.
Come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me back.
That's Harry Belafonte with a magnificent Deo. Takes me back to the old times.
And all the time that we were at school, I never met his parents. It was as if they didn't exist. He'd go back for holidays.
Come in, Africa, you're receiving us. Now we've got Umzike Fani Buthelezi. This is the sort of tune that's like honey to the soul.
Malawi made a big impression on him. He liked the people. I think it just gave him a wider perspective in the world at a very early age.
He would always bring stories back at the beginning of each term, plus a new collection of records.
I can remember hearing the Rolling Stones coming out of this huge wooden radio in the day room. The sound was so different from what we were living in our actual day-to-day reality. It was the sound of another world. That's the moment I think I decided to only follow music forever. That would be the way to live. I was a lousy student. I was always last in the class. My reports would be really terrible, the worst you can possibly imagine. My relation with my father was even worse. I began to dread seeing him, even the once a year, because the report would arrive in the post, and then all hell would break loose. I would say from my upbringing that authority was something to be avoided, if possible, attacked. If you could get in and attack it and get away without being burnt, I would say that was high on the list of priorities. In 1968, the whole world was exploding. There was Paris, Vietnam, Grosvenor Square, the counterculture. I think that gave me an edge to put into punk. It was a great year to come of age.
Joe was the way he was, but I could never understand what happened to David.
Almost on one day, you walked into his bedroom, and it changed from being a normal boy's bedroom into being black, swastikas and fascism and Mein Kampf, ultra right wing.
David just went into Regent's Park one day and took an overdose of pills. And finally went onto this little island. He decided that things weren't satisfactory.
Joe had been the first person to see him and had to identify the body, which must have been a terrifying trauma.
But he didn't talk about it. I think he wanted to kind of keep a lot of stuff at bay. Just keep it at a distance.
I'm the family's unknown boy, golden curls and vanity hair, pretty girls with faces fair, see the shine in the black sheep boy.
And that was the great Tim Hardin, perhaps a lost genius of music, with Black Sheep Boy.
Dead strict environment where you had to really struggle to get out the game and straight into this seething LSD orgy.
There's only one answer to what you're going to do after school, and that is art school. The last resort of malingerers and bluffers and people who don't want to work.
But the rustler,
Joe, whose name was John, said, oh, my name's Woody.
In the dead hours of night.
I said to him, oh, that's interesting. How'd you get the name Woody? And he said, oh, I just made it up on the spot.
A battle to fight.
I think because of Woody Guthrie. I met him at art college on the first day we lived together. He was instantly charismatic. Everything in the room focused around him. He always had a different way of putting things, a different angle on things.
He was thrown out because he did a collage of used Tampaxes as art, but it was too much for them.
Bang goes society's door. Guacamole so secure. Once we find our love and trust, surprising what we say.
I started to follow a musician around called Time and Dog. D-O-double-G. He had this years before Snoop Doggy Dogg. First collecting money for him in the London Underground, like a Mississippi bluesman's apprentice.
Time was the guy who taught and showed Joe that music was the root.
I bought a ukulele because I figured that had to be easier than a guitar, having only 4 strings. When I managed to get some chords together, I was chuffed.
We went down to play at some tube, and I said, Joe, we can't go down and busk the one song that we know. And Joe said, why? Because nobody's ever going to pass twice.
Timon and Joe were walking around in a park in Kilburn, and they came across a guy who I think had probably just come out of mental home. He was a bit strange, and he had nowhere to go, and he was very disoriented. And they brought him back to live with us, and he stayed with us for a while.
I remember the name of the guy. He was called Savory. And Joe installs this tramp with huge generosity in my bedroom.
When the landlady and landlord found out about us having this black guy, the woman attacked Timon Dog with a stiletto heel.
And they just went berserk. They threw us out, chucked all our gear out the window, and we called the police and said, look, and they said, fuck off, hippies.
I mean, it's bloody impossible to live with, frankly. You never knew where you were, when you were. He lived day for night. He'd go off somewhere to Glastonbury or to the Isle of Wight or somewhere, and he'd turn up a week later, completely unaware that you might have actually expected otherwise.
They'd had their summer love, and by 72, 3, it was all over. I always felt that it was like coming on the field of a great battle 12 hours after the battle was over. So the casualties were all lying on the field, but the battle was gone.
Come on, come on, come on. None has come that train. Come on, come on, come on. None has come that train. Oh, don't you wanna go?
He did have a very strong boy's own attitude to things. He'd have this kind of spirit of adventure. He'd sleep out under the stars when it was totally unnecessary. And he said, I'm going to be a rock star. So he was right.
Oh, don't you wanna go?
That was Bucko White, and it's the syncopation there, all that provided by one man, which I really like.
It was very difficult because I still really loved him. But I knew I had to get away because he was dropping out, and I was absolutely determined to carry on with art college.
And I hitched down to Cardiff, and she told me to shove off. And so I started to hitch back, and the first stop off is Newport. And I had some friends there.
Newport in 1973 was a very working-class town. You had the second largest steelworks in Newport. You had the coal mines still active, docks, there were boats coming up as far as the art college. There's nothing PC about Newport in those days. You'd go out and there'd be sort of punch-ups in the streets. It was a tough place. He'd come down from the south of England, the leafy suburbs, and he'd suddenly found himself in this industrial South Wales town, which was completely alien to anything he'd experienced in the past, but he loved it.
He just appeared one day in the entrance hall of the college looking for me. He came with his guitar on his back.
I had the feeling that he was getting away from or going to somewhere. He didn't sort of exactly fit in.
He used to come back to my bedsit, and we just used to literally sit up all night while I played my records. And he just looked at me and he said, "Is your mother proud of your eyelashes?"
And that was Israel Kamaka Wiwa Ole from Hawaii.
He used to sign on, and he got various jobs.
He was working in a carpet factory and a rubber factory, you know, come back with rubber all over his head.
He took a job in a graveyard.
I wasn't strong enough to dig graves. First morning they told me to dig a grave. When they come back, I'd gone down about 3 inches.
He'd got the sack when he was found asleep in the grave.
Although I wasn't at the art school, I crashed my way into the art school rock band that became known as the Vultures.
Really make it nasty and homemade, you know what I mean? You get loud enough.
This is one of the first songs he wrote.
Everybody ready? Take 4.
I drew a cartoon saying how brilliant we were.
Love is in here, thinking it's gonna rain. I watch 50 cars and I watch 50 planes. Meanwhile, all around me, my affairs generate. And all of those man, they go like to sleep. The fellas look each other, we're still at satisfied. I'm honest as Boy Scout or...
We conned this Paul Booker to book us into a big blues club type place in Bristol, but the crowd weren't having it. They pelted us with beer glasses. So after that night, I just realized I had to get back to the capital.
And now we're going to turn over the controls at the tower here to the great originator of all rap and ting.
Mr. Uroy, let it roll.
Instead of fussing and fighting, why not get together and live in one love and one unity, you know?
By this time, they had this really huge squat scene rolling in West 9. In 1974, there were rows and rows of buildings all bought up by the council and just left to rot. There were hordes of people in London who couldn't afford to pay rent.
There was an estate agents called the Rough Tough Cream Puff Agency, which put out a newsletter of available houses.
1A Portland Road, West 11. Access through the back door, has 11 large rooms, but needs enormous attention. There's a basement flat corridor up at number 10 Paris Square, West 11. And at 56 Pembridge Villas, West 11, it's totally corridor up except for the basement window, and we need to sawn through under the cover of convenient bushes.
The only thing to do was to kick in these abandoned buildings and then live in them.
Joe decided to open up a squat and went down there with crowbars and opened up 101 Walston Road. It wasn't just squatting because we were down and out. It was a political act that you can't leave buildings empty when there are people homeless.
Like bathing in the cool water of a fragrant ocean. And that was the sound of Ernest Ranglin and the voice of Baba Mao of Senegal.
I gathered the best people, i.e. people who weren't completely out of their minds, into one squat. And we formed a rock and roll band, the 101ers.
Down the road, I come a jungle partner.
And so a house band got going, and there's about 6 or 7 of us in it.
But he was loaded.
There were some people running from the regime in Chile. I had a Chilean drummer called Antonio, but when he went on holiday, Richard Snakes Dudansky, he took over after Antonio split.
I think he'd heard me banging around when I had a pair of bongos. He said, look, the drummer's gone, we've got a gig in 2 weeks.
I thought we could mount an attack on a stage and like actually get paid.
They were playing for the scene. That was their contribution. Communal entertainment, initially.
When we get short of enough money for food, Joe would go out and bus and come back with money to buy provisions for the whole group.
And he was like part of the community. In fact, Julien was the lead singer.
And I got him in to sing because I thought I was chronic. I really did, right? Because I thought he was better, right? And Nicky Foot, who was working with me back then, right, he said, that other singer you got in, he just sounds just like you. I thought, well, fuck it. So I become the singer again.
You got taken down to the pub for a drink, basically, and then you got told if you'd been fired.
Now, I remember I had to tell Simon the saxophone player, we're not having saxophone anymore, Simon.
We had harsh decisions. We got rid of our mate Mole, the bass player.
I remember Joe saying, well, I think we're going to take Mole for a drink.
It's the process of forming, you know, that's what happens.
I figured out that I'd sacked 48 people once.
And then my sister came in with her Bolivian boyfriend, and he said that the day he saw her, I want to make this girl mine, and so he did.
He took me on a date and he said, you see that pub over there, the Windsor Castle? He said, one day we're gonna play there.
We had the nerve to rent a room above a pub and charge people 10p to get in. That's how we learned to play, by doing it for ourselves, which is like a punk ethos. I mean, you've got to be able to go out there and do it for yourself, because no one's going to give it to you. It soon became like a real big mashup. Gypsies would come and rip everybody off.
Handbags would be flying out of the window and somebody would be catching them at the bottom.
New York town.
We were on stage playing and the police raided the place. And they didn't know who to search with all these like filthy squatters and gypsies and God knows what in this room. Mayhem broke loose. Carried on playing to this crazy thing going on. Yeah, that was fun.
He was never bothered about money, never. Money didn't mean anything to him, but he did like fame.
He decided to change his name to Joe Strummer. And of course, it was really difficult for everyone because we all kept saying, "Hey, Woody," and he'd just blank you. He wouldn't respond. He'd just say, "I'm not cool, Woody, you know. My name's Joe."
Well, it was either that or Johnny Caramello. I think Joe Strummer sort of won just by a little nose.
I still can only play all 6 strings or none, and not all the fiddly bits, which is why I called myself Joe Strummer.
Joe's a great inventor of names. He called me Snake Hips Dudansky. I've got no idea where he got it from.
He called me Dick the Shit because my Christian name is Richard, and it was Richard the Third, it was Richard the Turd, it was Dick the Shit.
I realised that we had to start writing our own material, so I wrote Keys to Your Heart, and I was just overjoyed that it came out good.
Well, it's a love song, isn't it? For Aloma.
We'd seen Joe play over at the Ackham Hall and the Windsor Castle and quite a few other places.
And the jury who saw big blue policeman, a little black book, wrote it down.
Even members of the Sex Pistols ended up there. They were watching that stuff while I was unaware of them, because it was the only jumping spot in West London on a Thursday.
But Joe was something special, best frontman out there.
The 101ers were about to be the top band in London.
They were at a point that they were really making it, like the Roundhouse, but that was not really enough for him, and he just felt he needed a breakthrough.
The Pistols had to come in and blow everything away. They were that stun grenade into the room before the door could go. They came out of nowhere, and they came to support us one night in the Nashville rooms. It was electrifying. It was that difference. They were like a million years ahead.
I think Joe was the only one that saw anything in it.
They destroyed everything that was going on in town that was completely over the second they came out on stage.
I imagine he would have saw us play and then figured, you know, the rockabilly thing weren't working and this was the way to go.
And right at that time, Bernie Rhodes walks into the gig.
We went to see him at the Golden Lion, all of us. Keith went backstage and went, "Can we talk to you?"
I think it was good luck to meet Bernie, the best bit of luck I ever had. And he drove me down to Shepherd's Bush. There, in the rear bedroom, was Mick Jones, Paul Simonon, Keith Levine, and me and Bernie walked in, and he introduced me all around, and then we sat on whatever bits of furniture we could find, and we kind of stared at each other. And he said, "I think you should form a group." And I thought about it. I said, "Can you give me 24 hours?" And he said, "Sure."
Sid and Keith Levine came to the squat. There was meetings in rooms and people mumbling and groaning.
It was very obvious that it was two different kinds of people, really.
He said, "Oh, I just love the way you play guitar." And I said, "Why don't you be in the band then?" And he went, "I will, I'll do it, I'll do it."
That was it. He came out and said, "Right, that's it. The 101ers is finished." And it was a bombshell to the rest of the band.
I mean, I knew it was in the air. You know, it was that the 101ers were the problem with the bass player, that we got rid of the guitar player. So I knew something was happening. Anyway, the following day I bumped into Bernie Rhodes, who was there.
Let me say something really quickly.
Yeah.
I formed the Sex Pistols, not Malcolm. You know that, don't you?
Yeah.
I found John.
Yeah.
Auditioned him.
Yeah.
Put him in the group. You know, I don't take the credit now. I take it later.
And it was very clear that he was the kind of guy that called the shots.
I'm the philosophy of it. I'm the great engine of it. I am punk. Without me, there's nothing.
I said, "Joe, you know, right, you know, the 101ers is finished, but I'm not going with this guy." And he said, "Oh, it's not possible, Snakes. We've got to do it with this guy." And that was it.
You're either for it, punk, or against it. And there's still people today that don't talk to me down in West London for going over to the other side.
To go on to this new bit of his life, he had to stop associating with us. And that was quite hurtful.
It was a bit like walking out on a whole lot of beliefs.
The house didn't really last long after that.
The day that I joined the Clash was very much back to square one, year zero. It was a bold move for me to jump into something different. Two guys in the back room of a squat in Shepherd's Bush. But I knew, you could tell by looking at them, you didn't even have to speak to them. Mick and Paul were different. I think we started to rehearse that afternoon. Bernie hired a warehouse off British Rail in Camden Town. Sometimes Bernie would come down and throw us out at night and we'd break back in when he'd gone. We were that keen. It was very much being like in a 24-hour gang, you know? We only had each other.
I knew I wasn't fitting in, and I wanted to be in the band, and it really got me down because I realised, shit, this isn't my band. I left the band. And then it just worked. It just made it that it was going to work.
Paul was just admitting that he couldn't play, and he admitted to me that he had no idea what this instrument was, right? And for a minute I thought, oh God, a whole room of people with no idea how to play anything.
Is Millie supposed to be producer of this?
Yeah, he is.
Get on with it. Count it in.
Right. Shut your mouth.
Shut your mouth. Don't tell me to shut my mouth.
mate.
Go on, do that.
We get really frustrated to have to quickly rush over and do all this. Give us an E.
He just picked it up. He could play as good as me in about 3 weeks.
One who can really play in the Clash is Mick Jones. More than I'll ever be able to.
What happened to your teeth?
My teeth?
Yeah.
I've never brushed them. I'm a walking advert for brushing your teeth.
That was what was good about punk. If you were ugly, you were in.
Sounds like low shit. Sounds great to me.
At
First, we will have to work more and eat less.
Look, you know, in the next couple of months, this country's going to have it really hard. Next couple of years, maybe. We ain't started yet, right? But I do believe that if you do it in your own way, you have 2 years of hardship, and I really mean hardship, you might get out of it, all right?
I'd been writing with the 101ers, but with no focus or idea what to write about. And Bernie Rhodes said, write about what affects you.
The Clash, for me, right, is a chance to get some great words going. And for Mick, he's really into the music, like, he can hear arrangements. You know, he knows what the bass should do, he knows what the drums should do, he knows what the guitar should do. He can hear it in his head, right? I can't hear that stuff.
All you have to do is look out there to write a song, really. You know what I mean? It's all out there, isn't it? When I'd see his set of words, the tune was sort of there for me anyway, and I could hear the tune coming out of it. There's the roar of the city. It does sound like our music.
Believe that you gotta live something to sing about it in a convincing way. Like when you hear a great song, someone's torn that piece out of their life.
You couldn't go the full way with Joe. There was something hidden that was a very deep thing.
I ran up to him and I jumped on him. He's with his cool friends and they're all punked up and there's this long-haired hippie girl jumping on him. And so he was kind of different, like a little awkward, and we never were like that. We were always very close. He was just very different, like trouble, and like serious, you know. He said, these hippies are all farts, smoking pot and all that, and so I changed. He had encouraged me to be in the Slits. He was showing me how to play the drums. He was supportive, but very soon it became not a good thing between us.
We were almost Stalinist in a way that you had to shed all your friends or everything that you'd known or every way that you'd played before.
So that all might see and agree. The laws are inscribed in a prominent place, to be remembered and obeyed forever.
I mean, do you have a moralistic view of anything you do?
Yeah, I wouldn't steal money off a friend. But I'd steal his girlfriend.
Right.
I think too much, you know, or not enough. I mean, I think all the time. I think thinking is like real fun, you know? I get a lot of fun out of thinking. I mean, I can't see any other point to getting up in the morning, doing everything and going to bed and getting up again. It's just the thinking that makes it a point to it, you know?
baseball shirt. I'd rather wear nothing but look like I'm ready to fight. I'm so bored with the USA. I'm so bored with the USA. What can I do?
And when the Clash came along and I went to see him, Hi Joe, it's Dick. It's Dick. And this shutter came down. It would have been nice if Joe Strummer had said, hi Dick, how are you? But he didn't. It was almost impossible for him to get out of character and go back. The next chapter had started.
The only way you can really change anything is if you don't repeat your mistakes or other people's mistakes, right? So I can look back at Jagger and all that lot, right? And I can really pick their mistakes out quite clearly. And I'm determined not to repeat those mistakes. I value my existence by what I achieve, you know, by what I create. That's it. Creation is everything, you know.
Yeah. I think it's, anything special? No, just blanket coverage.
I don't know what I'm after. If I knew what I was after, I probably wouldn't bother to go after it.
Give it a good hammering, John.
And this is Joe Strummer's London Calling on the World Service, coming out of one of these basements we have here in London, throbbing in the summer heat. That was Best Dressed Chicken in the Town by Dr. Alimantado. Well worth checking out him.
To kids like me who didn't really read newspapers, he kind of informed us about events that were going on in the world and made us politically aware, I guess.
One of the things I like this group to do is to try and stop loads of kids joining up to the National Front just because of ignorance.
Big Brother really is here.
It's worse now than ever. Even your Oyster card. You can tell where you were. They can tell where you're going. I haven't got one.
There was a moment where the world stopped. I mean, everything just stopped. 1976, 1977. Suddenly, ideas became more important than guitar solos. And a certain integrity became more important than driving a Rolls-Royce into a swimming pool. Rock stars were like Greek gods. You were lucky to be in the room with them.
Oh, look, that's me. That's me.
All that came to an end after the Clash. There was a feeling that if the Clash could do it, you could do it.
I just want to preserve, right, my personal freedom. I just want the right to choose, right? And it ain't no use me having the right to choose, right? And not everybody else to have it, right? Everyone's got to have it.
I just thought I joined a band to go to parties and have fun, not to argue about politics night and day. It felt like me versus everyone else. That's why I left, because it's such a grueling onslaught the whole time.
Mick found Topper, and Topper came down, and it just smoked.
It wasn't the sort of music I was into. You know, when punk first started, it was against all the music that I was into. And I thought, well, I'll join, make my name, and then move on to play proper music. Paul said, we've got to cut your hair off. Then Joe said, we've got to dye it. I went home to my wife, right? I left her in the morning with long hair and flares, and I went home with short, spiky blonde hair and zips. And I called him Woody for some reason. I know the reason, OK? He had little pointed ears at the top, and I thought he looked like Woody Woodpecker. Now, I didn't know that he'd been called Woody in before. And I said, "Oi, Woody." And he went, "Don't ever fucking call me that." And I thought, God, he's sensitive.
It's not a bad thing to have the Clash be your first ever rock show. 17 years old, hanging out with my mates, and we got into Trinity College, Dublin. At the back of the stage, they had a picture from the first album, which was a load of bobbies running down the street with truncheons, which was what was going on in London with the race riots. But in Ireland, it looked like Belfast. So it was a very, very, very tense moment as this backdrop was opened up.
We'll have to roll the tanks, cue the Air Force, roll the Army and the Navy.
And there was a real sense of jeopardy. There was a violence in the air. I was terrified. I was excited. And rock and roll was not entertainment in that moment. It was not a matter of life and death, something much more serious.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So me and my mates stayed up trying to figure out how we could all be in bands that meant as much as the Clash.
Let's go! Oi! Oh! Let's go! Oi! Oh! Let's go! The moment in a straight line. You're going through a tight one. You keep the listener mind. Let's grip up.
Being in the right time at the right place with the right shit, it's just explosive. It was like pirates slashing their way through. We just got completely out of control. We had crews of people stealing cars, hopping rides, just following this thing. I remember once a local TV station came to shoot us in the dressing room before the show. We always used to let people in because, hey, the audience were our friends, you know what I mean? And behind me, it was like one of those jokes where 19 people get out of a baby car. Someone had opened the dressing room window, and people were climbing in from the alley. And there's like, I'm not joking, 50 people climbing through this window like a Charlie Chaplin movie.
Hey, ho! Let's go! Hey, ho! Let's go! Hey, ho! Let's go!
All right, Blitzkrieg Bop by the Godfathers of Punk Rock. Ladies and gentlemen, the Ramones.
If the kids didn't have money to get home, he'd give them money to get home. If they didn't have money for drinks at the pub, he'd give them money for drinks.
The police would wait till we were driving across the mountains. After a few motels, we'd started to borrow the pillows because it made it easier sitting in a coach seat overnight if you had a pillow. So when they couldn't find any drugs, the police searched the bus and they came up with something like 30 pillows. And then they found hundreds of hotel room keys.
And they said, right, that's theft. And then they threatened to charge every one of us individually with one each and keep us there all night. So Joe said, I'll do the pillows, you take the rack for the keys. And we were locked in the same cell for like 3 nights.
You're going to room 101.
We really got close and we just talked honestly, and I got to speak to the real Joe. Now, every time I'd spoken to him before, there were people watching or people listening, and he wouldn't drop the act. We both said we were scared, because at the time they were making a big thing about the punk thing, and we thought, you know, we might end up in more trouble than we were really in. You know, just got honest with each other. He still had this thing about he was a punk rocker, but he'd been to a public school. They always fucked him up right from the beginning, you know?
I don't care what he's from, he ain't a phony. You know what I mean? And he weren't acting a role. You know, he believed what he was doing.
I think Gabby started going out with Joe, and I just remember this guy walking around the flat, our little council flat, with his shoulders up here and his black leather jacket, mumbling. He never said much. They moved to Ladbroke Grove. I'd go there, and then I got to know Joe. And he was a great host. He was a brilliant host, making sure everybody had something to drink and chairs to sit on.
Coming from a family of diplomats, he'd been taught, you know, to bring out the cocktails for other guests when he was staying with his parents.
Hey, Mick, you want some LSD? Better have 3. Yeah. You want to really get out there.
I definitely believe, because of punk, that you can have whatever you want. You know, you say, fuck off, this is what I think. But I definitely think that's what formulated me as an artist.
I was the Clash fan. I seen them in '78, they came and played at the Apollo and there was a riot. The Bouncers were big Glasgow thugs who really hated the punks. The Clash had to keep stopping the gig.
I couldn't sing if I felt that people were being brutally mistreated.
They're fucking dancing! All right, dancing, you're fighting!
I really loved them because they stood up to the Bouncers.
The audience are your friends, and you know better than them. We were one with the audience. You should never feel above anyone.
When punk first started, it didn't seem particularly black, friendly. And so when the Clash's first album came out and they got Police and Thieves on it, and they got a scene from the carnival, it sort of made punk accessible to me. I felt like it was a way of saying, yeah, you know, come in, this is for you as well.
White music has always taken from black music. The difference was with people like The Clash is that Strummer and Jones were inspired by people that were living next door. So the effect was a lot more direct.
White youth, black youth, better find another solution.
I remember saying you can't hear the words. But the words are really great, man. Really great, and you can't hear them. Don't you think that's ironic?
Joe had a way with words, the sense of narrative and drama. Joe would have more ideas in a rhyming couplet than some people have on their whole fucking album.
I really connected with Joe's lyrics. Anti-establishment, anti-military, anti-work. Especially the anti-work bit, you know? Because I was working in a factory and I thought, am I going to have to do this for the rest of my life?
This is why we came up with so much idealism, because we figured we was going to need that much to combat a situation like being rich and famous.
All I had was those boats. I had to do something with them, right? I did as much as I could.
No, I used to consider Bernie as a pain in the ass. He always just seemed to be stirring it up. He always wanted trouble.
Joe, I didn't realise, was such a coward, right? Nick, I didn't realise was such an egomaniac. Paul, I didn't realise was such a pussy whip guy. And the other one I couldn't stand.
He called me, what was it?
Provincial tosser.
Because I came from Dover.
Bernie got sacked. All of a sudden we were on our own, as if like Daddy had gone away. And I think this is where we proved ourselves. We stayed in some shithole in Pimlico for 5 months. We were in trouble. We'd lost our management. We just sat there every day and wrote and wrote. And we got that thing down so good, we ran into a studio, we knocked the whole thing off in like 3 weeks and 2 days.
London calling to the faraway towns. Now war is declared and battle come down. London calling to the underworld. Come out of the cupboard, you boys and girls. London calling, now don't look to us. Phony Beatlemania has bitten the dust. London calling, see we ain't got no swing except for the rain and the truncheon thing. The ice age is coming, the sun's zooming in. Meltdown expected, the wheat is good in. Engines stop running, but I have no fear, cause London is drowning. I live by the river.
At the time I was living right by the Thames. I was following a lot of the doom prophecies. You know, the scientists having the big arguments about who's right and who's wrong. One lot was saying the ice age is coming, and then another lot was saying we're going to collide with the sun, making you feel like I'm just an ant, is it worth living? Then they were going on, well, you better watch out down there on the Thames. You're due for a flood on the spring tide, and you're all going to drown. I was cheering myself up by putting all these ridiculous things into one basket.
Played it to Mick, and he said he loved the song. He tapped the lyric sheet with his finger. He told me to write the message that we were going to call out around the world. It needed to break out and reach America.
Now get this! London calling, yes, I was there too. And you know what they said? Well, some of it was true. London calling at the top of the dial. And after all this, won't you give me a smile? I never felt so much alike.
So the Sex Pistols landed here in 1869.
We're not particularly talented, we try on.
What is it in terms of the energy? I mean, you put out more energy.
We give it all we got, that's all. It's as simple as that. Everybody's used to paying $8 and getting half measures and like going home satisfied. Well, in England, they gave up being satisfied 3 years ago. You gotta give it all you got or forget it.
He knew the culture of America. He knew the literature. He knew the music of it, backwards and forwards. And so he hit it off immediately. Here was this unlikely meeting of guys that grew up thousands of miles apart, but the same things moved us. He was passionate. He sang every word like he meant it. He sang about things that were deep down in his soul. He sang about injustices, and he sang about everything as if it was urgent.
I don't know if his politics could be separate from his art. They're kind of a spiritual politics. He didn't ask you to just question authority. He asked you to really explore the very nature of authority. What does it mean to be free?
I suppose the initial effect the Clash had on me was the proper effect. You know, you were experiencing a sincerity, not only in the lyrics, but in the music as well. You know, there was a truth in the attack.
They sort of pretended that they hated America, but Joe loved cowboy stuff and big cars and big pizzas, and when you went to the bar, a single was a double.
Honey, I forgot to duck.
So there was a lot of things that they liked about America.
I came out of the Vietnam War, and I was very much into people's liberation struggles. In '76, I got very involved with the Sandinistas.
It was a sort of teenage revolution where the people actually, for once, took control of their own country for the first time.
I was given, as a gift, these